everybody. Today is Tuesday, October 13th. It's 8:30, and we are here for the Legislative and Human Resources Committee. First thing on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone from the public who'd like to address the committee this morning? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 2, approval of the minutes from our September 22nd meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? We have a motion by Commissioner Antor, support by Commissioner Breevy. Any questions, comments about the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up on the agenda is from the Treasurer's Office, a performance measurements review. And of course, we have with us Ken Parrish. Good morning, Ken. As Ken makes his way up to the podium, I want to point out that although the monitors at our desks are working and we can see Ken's presentation here, the public monitor is out. So we just found that out this morning, and I understand we're working diligently to get that fixed. So we apologize to anyone for that inconvenience. So with that being said, good morning, Ken.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today. My commissioner, Commissioner Bolter, asked me to keep this under 4 minutes. So I'm just going to say, you've got my presentation. What are your questions? I tried, Commissioner.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure for me to be here this morning to talk about the performance measures for the Treasurer's Office. I will be looking at the alignment with your priorities, in particular some of the key metrics that we work with, some key collaborations, and a look ahead. Template probably looks familiar to you after as many meetings as you've had on this stuff. But I do appreciate the staff, whoever the staff was that put the template together. I want to thank them in advance because it really does help us focus in on what is important to you as committee members. The mission of the Office of the County Treasurer is to collect lodging and delinquent real property taxes and manage all county funds within relative laws, regulations, policies, and community standards. Of course, first in that is laws. Much of what we do in the Treasurer's Office is spelled out in sometimes painstaking detail. So we don't have a whole lot of discretion. There are a few things that we can use some discretion with, but much of what we do is dictated by law. So, and then within that, we also have county policies, which in some cases are even intentionally more restrictive than state law. Here are a few of our key goals. The first one is to collect delinquent real property taxes in accordance with methods prescribed by state statute. And our objective is to receive and account for 100% of delinquent real property taxes. We do that every year. The way the laws are written, we're almost guaranteed that, but we've been very successful with it so that we do collect all delinquent taxes either from the taxpayer or through the foreclosure and sale process. So it's been something that's worked very well for us. To collect all lodging taxes due the county. That's been a big one over the last few years. I'm sure many of you are aware of the issue we had with the Holiday Inn Crown Plaza. We did finally get them caught up. They're remaining caught up. So we've been successful there. However, we don't necessarily have the same level of big stick, if you will, with lodging taxes that we do with property taxes. So one of the ways that we have traditionally gone about encouraging compliance is through our audit process. And our objective is to audit at least 25% of all eligible establishments annually. There are some hotels that, whether they're, for example, the Prince Center in Calvin College is not subject because it's run by the college. But most hotels, motels, B&Bs, et cetera, are eligible. So we do set out to audit at least 25% every year. And For 2012, we met that. 2013, we fell a little bit short. That was the year that our lead tax auditor passed away unexpectedly, and the second auditor, who ultimately became the tax auditor, was also, in addition to frankly being in shock at the sudden passing of her boss, also had her own medical leave that she took that year. So we fell a little bit under that year. Last year we got back on track, and we're fully expecting to hit that number again in 2015. Then investments. That's the one that most people want to ask me about. Al asked me about it earlier so that I could buy him a new TV. But again, we want to invest according to the county's investment policies. The investment policy is one of those areas where we are actually, in some cases, more stringent than state law, because we want to make sure that our investments are safe and secure. And so with that, I say it every year, I'll say it again, we follow what I term the SLY principle of investing: safety, liquidity, and yield, in that order. So if we're going to really project that and follow through with that, our first objective then must be to preserve 100% of our investment principal. We have done that every year that I've been treasurer. Much of that is due to our policy of, or practice of investing and holding to maturity. When you start buying securities and then having to resell them on the open market, that's when you risk gains or losses. And it's, in most cases, in my opinion, the losses would offset any potential gains we would have. So we don't do that. So every year we have maintained 100% of our principal, and we expect that to continue. We do then, going down that list of slide down to yield, we do expect to earn something on our money. For the last several years, it's been woefully lower than we would hope, but it is certainly something. The general fund has been earning somewhere in the neighborhood of, in 2012, almost $300,000, and then this year we expect that to be $275,000. So it's in the ballpark. We keep hearing the Fed's going to raise rates, which will in turn drive up our investment rates, but we've been hearing that for about 3 years and it hasn't happened yet. So we've taken the approach of, we are investing a little bit shorter on the idea that rates will go up. Every prognosticator out there suggests that it will happen yet this year. So we don't want to lock in these very low rates for any longer than necessary. But we do earn something. The total pool of which the general fund comes out of is probably in the neighborhood of about $1.2 million for all of the various funds that we invest. We do collaborate. I apologize. I lost a slide somewhere in here. I told you I was going to talk about the alignment with board priorities, and I see that didn't make my presentation. I apologize for that. Basically, one of your priorities is to manage the county in a very fiscally sound manner, and that's really where the treasurer's office falls in terms of collection of revenue, as well as investment of funds, and the departmental budgets, which we work very hard to stay within. So I do apologize for that. I know I had it in there at one point. Anyway, key collaborations. We also collaborate significantly. Probably the one we're best known for in our office is the local government investment pool. There are about 25 local units and other authorities and agencies that are eligible and participate in the investment pool. We do so at no charge to them. We believe that it brings an added value to us by being able to have more funds in total to invest. We're able to invest in larger blocks of money, which gains us a little bit better rate. You know, we can earn more on $1 million CD than you might earn on a $10,000 or even $100,000 CD. So it works for everybody. And it's been working very well since 1985, when Kent County was the driving force for creation of that in Michigan. We also certainly work with all the local units on tax collection. We have the way the process works, as I'm sure you know, the local units are the initial collection agent. They are the billing agent and initial collection agent for real property taxes. Those taxes that don't get paid in a certain length of time then get returned to our office and become our responsibility. Then through our issuance of the delinquent tax anticipation notes, we then make all of the taxing authorities whole on what they are owed. And so we then are the sole entity that is owed money. And we collect those, we collect the interest and fees associated with that, and it works out very well. All the taxing authorities get their money on the front end, we get our money. We also earn enough extra through the interest and fees, so that after all of the notes are paid off, we will have a surplus that we can then turn back to the general fund. And we do that every year. I sit down with Steve and Francine from the Fiscal Services Department to determine what's available to be transferred, and that happens every year. And then finally, what I would call an internal collaboration. We, by statute, the county treasurer is actually the office responsible for the sale of dog licensing. However, along with many other counties, we have a very well-run animal control department, animal shelter. So they actually take the lead on the sale of dog licenses. They do the sending out of the cards, tracking all of the owner information. We do cell tags in our office, so that if you have a dog and need to license it, that can be done at our counter. But all of the kind of the back office work that is done on dog licensing is done through the animal shelter. As a side note, there is some discussion in Lansing right now. The Senate Policy Office is looking very closely at the dog licensing laws, partly because while I'm sure nobody here has an unlicensed dog, there are unfortunately too many of them in our communities throughout the state. And so the thought of the person working on this was that, well, if the law's not effective, maybe we should just get rid of it. The county treasurers have taken the position that no, we shouldn't just get rid of it, because it does really, the driving force with the law is to require the rabies vaccination. So we see it as a public health concern, and first and foremost. So we don't think the law should go away. We've suggested some tweaks to encourage greater compliance with it. But that's something that you as well might want to keep an eye on, because I know our animal control director, that Carly, agrees with the county treasurer's position, but you may be asked at some point to take a position on legislation if it gets that far. So, finally, a look ahead. FMS implementation, financial management system. It's the train is rolling down the tracks and going to hit us here in about 2.5 months. While Fiscal Services is certainly the lead agency, lead department on this, we will certainly work very intensively within PeopleSoft, and we will within the new system. So it will be hitting our office as well. And we'll be working throughout the county on the cash management aspects of it with all the departments that do receive revenue through their offices. We're also looking to make a change. I don't want to say upgrade as much as just provide online credit card payment availability for delinquent real taxes. We have not done that as of yet. We're going to be making a change in how the tax information is presented online, so that it will always be real time, so that people will be able to pay their taxes by credit card online if they choose to do so. And then finally, working with all of the other departments that accept credit cards, there are new credit card security protocols in place. You probably have heard about how the cards now have electronic chips, and so that's driving. One, we have to make sure that all of our credit card readers are updated to be able to accept cards that have the chip. And then there's a whole slew of other protocols that have to be put in place. The credit card companies are trying to push liability back on the merchants, or in this case, the county. So we're working with the IT security director to make sure that we get all of the things in place that we need to do. So that's kind of in a nutshell what's happening in the Treasurer's office, and I would be very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Do we have any questions for Ken this morning? Commissioner Vonk.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have approximately 80 hotels and motels that we monitor?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And of that 80, business model, probably 20 of them do have we get half our tax dollars, probably from 25% of them.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a fair statement. I don't know the number right off.
I was just wondering if that half should be done more on a regular basis, and how much taxes do you find that there's slippage in or whatever while you're doing those audits?
We don't find a lot of slippage. If anything, there may be they may interpret for example, one of the things that we deal with is the term transient guest. And whether if you stay in a hotel for 30 days or more consecutively, you are not considered a transient guest and you are not subject to the lodging tax. If you stay 29 days, you are. So we will occasionally find things there, but really I think except for the rare case, what I think is happening is that because we do audit regularly, they know that if they underpay us, we will, in all likelihood, discover that, and they will owe us the money along with interest and penalty. So it's really, the audit encourages compliance rather than finding dollars, if you will. And that's why, and frankly, the hotels that are the larger ones generating most of the revenue are also the ones that have the more sophisticated accounting departments and are frankly much less likely to have lapses or disagreements in interpretation. So we don't, we don't collect, a whole lot of money from the large ones when we go into audit because they're so good at knowing what to do and how to do it. But it really, again, we don't find a lot, and in fact, sometimes we find that they've overpaid, and we do refund them in that case. But it really comes down to compliance, which is the same principle as the IRS has always operated on. The threat of an audit, when in fact they only audit 1 or 2% of the returns that they get, but almost everybody's afraid of an audit from the IRS, so they don't want to do anything improper on their returns. I believe the same principle's in play here.
Do we send them a letter that we're making an audit coming up next week, or are these?
Oh yeah, they are scheduled in advance because they have to pull together a lot of information for us. So yeah, we don't unless we have reason to believe that something nefarious is going on. We do not do a surprise audit on anybody. It's all scheduled in advance. They have a lot of records they have to pull together, and so. They are scheduled out.
Unlike the health department where when the county goes in there, it looks like the Dracket and the Bug commercial, and they say, Kent County. I was on one of those once, and they really had a wake-up call. I just happened to get there early, and they were a little nervous about the health department showing up that day.
So, well, I could understand that, but yeah, we're handle things a little differently.
Another question, I think Hilton's building a new hotel on East Beltline near 28th Street, north of 28th Street on East Beltline. Now, how long before that hotel falls in line? And
I can't tell you off the top of my head. Our tax auditor, anytime we hear of a new one under construction, we make sure that she is aware of that and monitors that. Again, because it's a Hilton, they know that they're subject to our taxes. They will most likely contact us before we have to contact them. But we do track those, but I can't tell you off the top of my head when a particular one's going to open. I know there's 4 or 5 of them in the works right now.
Okay,
so.
Thank you.
Commissioner Antor?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning.
I was just curious on the investments, the pool for local units. Mm-hmm. Do they have to commit to a certain amount of time? They're going to keep their money in there? Do they have different vehicles within our?
The actual time commitment, according to contract, is only 7 days. However, we work very closely with them to help them understand that it works best if they're looking at it as more of a long-term investment. It is essentially liquid money to them. If they need it, we can make it happen. And typically, while the contract says we can take 7 days, we don't have to. But in the past, we have run into circumstances where local units have wanted, for one thing, they would set up more than one fund with us, maybe the fire truck fund and general fund and whatever. Well, and then we'd start getting faxes saying, please move money from this one to that one, please cut a check for $25, and we said no. We are not your bank. We are more of an investment. So it's really more of a working agreement between us and my office and the local treasurer, so that they typically will put larger amounts with us, and they will typically leave it for longer time, 6, 9, 12 24 months, whatever. But it is available to them when they need it, if they need it. So.
You had mentioned CDs, for instance, so I know when the money's in a CD, there's a commitment of time, so their money sits in the pool that they can move around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we basically, because of how our investments are laddered out, we have money coming, investments that are coming due or maturing, thank you, that's the word I could think of, almost on a daily basis. So that's how, you know, typically we will reinvest those funds, but if they say, you know, whether it be they or whether it be the county that says, hey, we're going to buy this piece of land for $500,000, can we need to come up with the cash. We have funds coming almost every day, so that's how we're able to still invest in fixed term investments, hold to maturity, as I mentioned earlier, and still meet the locals' needs.
I think it's a great collaboration, something
Thank you.
It's really a great benefit. Do most of the local units participate? Or?
I think out of the governmental, there's 34 other 35 governmental agencies. I think we have, at last count, about 24 or 25, and then we still have a few other authorities: the Convention Arena Authority, Network 180, Kent District Library. So all are eligible as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, additional questions this morning? Commissioner Talon?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Ken.
Good morning.
A lot of what I'm seeing here is, I appreciate the report, it's a lot of things about kind of looking internally at your department. And when I look at the mission statement that we've all got in front of us here in the seats we're in, I look at this last line that talks about improving the quality of life for all our citizens within the constraints of sound fiscal policy. And there's something that I've become aware of in your department over the past year or two that's not in here, and I just want to suggest that perhaps it's something that I ought to think about putting in here, and that's the assistance that you provide to people who are having difficulty paying their taxes. And I think that's a really significant thing, and something that would be good to track, perhaps, to see what kind of effect you've been able to have with that. I'm familiar with cases where you provide all kinds of advice and support to people to try to get them to pay their taxes under kind of unusual circumstances. Mm-hmm. So just want to suggest that you think about somehow tracking that, because the things that we track we tend to pay more attention to, and I think that's a really significant thing that your department does, and I want to commend you for it.
Well, thank you, and that's I'm writing a note right here.
The other thing I wanted to comment on, or just throw out a thought about, and that's the effect of the land bank, and I think that significantly affects the work that you do. And there's been a lot of controversy over the years about, how does that affect the collections for the delinquent tax revolving fund. Two things that I think would be interesting if we can figure out a way to report that in outcomes, really. One is how did the properties that were foreclosed for taxes, how did they perform compared to if they didn't go to the land bank, they do go to the land bank. And I think there's been some work by the land bank on that. But I feel like we should get some information about that. It's important for commissioners to have that.
I agree with you, Commissioner. I've tried really hard to differentiate land bank activity from my office's activity, and certainly there's a lot of cooperation and impact, but for example, to give a report on the results of the properties that the land bank has acquired really isn't a treasurer, I mean, I may be wearing two hats at once, but I wanted to make sure that I'm not putting those in as treasurer's department, because that's not truly my responsibility as treasurer. The land bank is a separate authority, but I agree with you that that's valuable information, and I know that land bank staff is working to put together information to provide to all of the commissioners.
Well, I guess I would push back a little bit and suggest that in your role as treasurer, trying to, account for the revenue, which, commissioners are pretty interested in, is a significant, piece or responsibility. I would think, but maybe you feel differently about
Well,
that.
there
feels
may
like
be
an appropriate role.
Well, certainly accounting for the revenue. Unfortunately, some of, we've had this process in place for a couple of years. Some people agree with it, others disagree with it, gone through a lengthy lawsuit over it. And unfortunately, a lot of it is, if you can choose two paths, and then you can see the results of the path you've chosen, but to determine what the results would have been if you chose the other path are impossible. You can speculate, and speculations have occurred on both sides of the argument, but there's really no way to know. If the city of Grand Rapids chooses to acquire all their properties and transfer them to the land bank and take them out of the auction, I can't tell you how much I would have made on those at the auction. I can tell you how much, what happened to them through the land bank, but it's really, there's no way of knowing. I can speculate based on some historical information, but, and vice versa. If what goes at the auction, I can't tell you what would have happened if it had gone through the land bank. I can speculate, but others can speculate wildly different numbers than I could speculate. So that's the challenge that I have with that aspect of it. But in general, I certainly support the notion of providing all commissioners with good information about both what happens to the properties that go to the auction and to those that don't.
Chair, if I could just follow up on a related line, I appreciate that. The other thing related to the land bank, and I think related directly to the work of the treasurer and interest by commissioners, I'm not sure where this goes,
Okay.
but the other kind of outcome that I'm interested in is if as a county we choose to handle tax foreclosed properties through the land bank, what difference, and again there's going to be some speculation here, but what difference is it making in the tax revenue in those communities where the land bank properties are being processed? So to take property values within 500 yards or whatever of the land bank properties and take a look at what's happened to those. I mean, it's a great intern project to take a look at that kind of data.
Yes.
I think that's important for us to have. Again, I see a direct connection between the treasurer's office, the commission, and the work of the land bank, but really being able to demonstrate the outcomes of what's happening to properties around there. So I just throw those out as things to think about.
Thank you, and I agree with you, and we can certainly see what we can do. Again, there's some speculation involved, but there has been a lot of study done, not only in Kent County, but throughout the country, and we do often quote some of those studies with regard to the impact on surrounding properties. But I think we do have a long enough and broad enough track record here in Kent County that we can probably draw some sort of conclusions on our own data. So I will certainly take a look at how we can do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bolter.
Thank you. Quick question, this is minor in comparison to the other questions, and I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but getting back to that legislation that's being proposed regarding the dog licenses, how much revenue would we lose if do you know roughly how much that brings in a year? I mean, I know.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I got that information from the animal shelter.
Okay, I assume does that go into the general fund, or does that pay for the shelter?
It helps pay for the shelter
Okay.
and related costs. And that's typically what happens throughout the state.
Yep.
Unless some counties don't have their own shelter, so they will contract with the Humane Society or other organization.
Okay.
But, and I'm not sure that it's even at a bill stage yet. It's just in the study stage.
Okay.
Through the Senate Policy Office.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Stek.
Thank you, Chair. Two quick questions.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that with respect to the intergovernmental investment practice, we do not charge the other entities for the services of
That is
investing.
correct.
Do we have unique costs for doing that? For example, are we required to be licensed in order to invest their funds for them and bonded for that?
We are not required to be licensed, there's no separate bonding requirement. Myself and the chief deputy are required to be bonded and are, but there's no separate requirement because of the Local Government Investment Pool Act.
Okay.
So there really aren't the amount of time specific to the Local Government Investment Pool is so minimal as to, it would be probably take more time to try to separate out and track that time than right. So as far as I know, there's one other county that has a pool, Oakland County, and they somehow came up with a calculation on how to charge. They do charge like 2 basis points. Again, tracking that and billing and collecting for that minuscule amount just doesn't seem worth our effort.
Thank you.
Here, but if they want to do it, more power to them.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Parrish this morning? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much, Ken, for your presentation and for all your hard work on behalf of the county. We certainly
Thank you very
appreciate
much. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on the agenda is an action request from the Board of Commissioners regarding a Community Mental Health Authority Board appointment.
This is a request to recommend to the board to appoint John Matthias to the Community Mental Health Authority Board to fill an unexpired 3-year term ending March 31st, 2018. A vacancy has occurred on the Community Mental Health Authority Board. Citizen interest in serving on the board was solicited via our website. An interview team consisting of Commissioners Shroll, Stek, and Talon are recommending the appointment of John Matthias to fill the unexpired 3-year term ending March 31st, 2018.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Stek, support by Commissioner Bolter. Questions or comments on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 5 on the agenda is miscellaneous from commissioners this morning. Do we have any commissioner miscellaneous? Okay, seeing none, I have a couple things. First of all, I want to thank Commissioner Vonk, who will be stepping up to chair this meeting in a couple weeks when we meet next. I unfortunately won't be able to attend. I also wanted to, you are all aware that we're in the midst of citizen board appointment season, so you should all have your giant binders, and I know we're all going to be meeting after this is concluded so that we can get moving on that. Our goal is to have those appointments pretty much put together, at least our recommendations, by November 19th so that we can all enjoy a Thanksgiving holiday without that hanging over our heads. So please keep that in mind as you're putting your schedules together. And then finally, several of you will be joining us on Friday for a legislative breakfast with our local senators and representatives. And so we look forward to having a good conversation with them and talking about the priorities of the county and getting some feedback from them as well. So with all of that being said, we'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned until our next meeting on October 27th. Thank you.